The markets keep on falling down as the consensus is that the altcoin and Bitcoin bear market has started. It's the key question to answer as we are deep in the 4-year cycle, so we need to check whether we are in an actual bear market as we still want to have returns in our portfolio. Time to analyze this statement in today's video. The majority on social media is stating that we are in a Bitcoin bear market as there is one chart that is basically going and swimming around social media that we're going to be discussing in this update. And it's an interesting question as there is a constant debate occurring whether the 4-year cycle is happening or whether we're going to have a longer cycle. So my question to you is, leave behind in the comments what your view is on the markets and where do you think that we're going to be heading? And I'll be using those analysis and your comments in the coming tweets to discuss what the view of everyone is on the markets. In my data, what we also can see is that 30% of the people that are watching aren't even subscribed to this YouTube channel. And I know it's a very hard market. It's a dark period where the altcoin portfolio is getting crushed. But can you do me one favor and please subscribe to this YouTube channel? Then I'll make sure that I keep on building the content and improving the content to bring you more quality to assist you on your journey. Now, the chart that we are mentioning comes down to this particular case, as you can see, which is the liquidity grab that we're copy pasting from the previous cycle. 2021 peaked with the sweep of the highs during November of 2022, where we went to $69,000, came all the way back down, and then we started to fall back to $16,000. I just did a podcast with Willy Woo, which I said yesterday as well, and he explained perfectly why this bear market in 2021 and 2022 was hugely profitable for anyone that was market neutral. It was a very, very good conversation, and I think it's a good one for you to watch as well. As for me, I learned a lot during that conversation. But when we look at the market structure, people always try to compare the previous cycle or find arguments to compare cycles with each other, which more often than not is just complete nonsense. And in this case, we have done the liquidity sweep. We are actually facing 100K area or the all-time high as a critical resistance. But this cycle is completely different than the cycle in 2021 because we don't have the double top pattern. We had the Bitcoin all-time high before the halving. We have an altcoin bear market that has been lasting for 4 years. And the first quarter of 2025 is more different and complex than the previous first quarters of 2021 and 2017, which means that this cycle has become more complex and less volatile for Bitcoin and more difficult to handle for almost anyone in this space, which means that we're still at the business cycle bottom and that the 4-year cycle or the occurrence of the 4-year cycle is fading away, which is what if we're actually getting a case where we don't have any bear markets and continue to have consistent rallies upwards with minimal periods of downwards momentum in between. And that's an interesting chart that Quinton posted where we have a small bear market taking place. And I think Bob Lucas was also posting something like this where he assumes that we're going to have another rally upwards going into the end of 2025, have a swift correction of around 30 to 40%, and then have another rally going into 2028, which is completely erasing what we know or what we think we know about the market. So it might be that we are in a different market, as Quinton's chart shows, and it says that we might be in a slight bearish period, but nowhere comparable to the previous period markets or the start of the previous bear market. And we've also not experienced peak bull cycles like we've seen before. Just realized that also the previous cycle of 2021 was completely different than the one in 2017. And the one of 2017 was completely different than the one in 2013. So the ultimate case, as I said, would be the super cycle. And that would be massive, in which Willy Woo, as I said, also tweeted something about the length of the returns and the length of the entire cycle, in which he said that there is likely no bull cycle top as of yet. and there's going to be a very predictable slash unpredictable walk, in which the predictable walk is the 4-year cycle and the unpredictable walk is the complexity of macroeconomic and demand supply from a complex ecosystem through which we can have a different market than what we all think we are going to have. So it won't be the last cycle, but it will be the last easy cycle with enormous returns. That's what I believe. That's been my statement, and that's also what I expect to see happening in the cycle in general, which is why I take a lot of risk. Now, given that the statement of a bear market has started is too simplistic and just comparing peaches with apples, what does that give us? Well, it provides us a case that we're not at the end of the bull market for altcoins. We're actually at the bear market low for altcoins, which I've been explaining. As Quinton shows, his poll provides some data on the expectations of the cycle top. And if we are at the actual bottom of the markets, people undervalue or underestimate the upside of the actual market and are actually over-promising or overestimating the downside of the market. In reverse, when we are getting towards the peak of the bull, people overestimate the exact peak and underestimate the potential downside. And that's what we can see. As in this poll, people are basically expecting that we're going to peak between 110 and 150k, which then, if we look at the data, almost nobody is interested into crypto at this point, as also the tweet of Quinton shows, in the sense that we are still want to see Bitcoin becoming vertical, like we know from any standard market cycle. The previous stop in 2021 was quite of a deviation. You want Bitcoin valuations of altcoins to rally upwards. That would be a sign that we're getting overheated. But the primary sign of getting towards close to a bear market is that any Bitcoin or crypto app is in the top 5 of the App Store and the Bitcoin dominance is below 40%. So that's bringing me towards the charts to see where we are at this point and to see where we are going to be heading to when we look at the data instead of just some plain tweets. Time to analyze the charts, which is or are providing us arguments of where we are at with the markets. And we are with Bitcoin in the middle of the bull cycle. That's quite clear. If we look at the valuation of Bitcoin and just the Bitcoin USD chart, it's clear that from 15k towards 105k, we are in an uptrend and we are somewhere in the middle. However, we haven't seen the actual bull, which is the famous part of Bitcoin, where it starts to go vertical, which is what we've seen in 2021, which is what we have seen in 2017. And I don't believe that looking at Bitcoin against USD is the actual right way of looking at the valuation of Bitcoin. I think you need to look at Bitcoin USD divided by gold, which is basically telling us the strength of the actual bull cycle. And in this case, as you can see on the screen, we are still down off the actual high in 2021. We have created a new all-time high in 2024, 2025, but we stabilized and we are still having an uptrend, while in difference or in comparison with 2017 and 2013, you can see this is the peak in 2013, this is the peak in 2017, and this is the peak in 2021, which should have been way higher. It shows us that we're just in the path of consolidating and building up before that famous vertical move starts to kick in, which is completely different. And then if we look at the Bitcoin USD chart alone, we can also see that we're just building up momentum, and that this time where we have the liquidity sweep is completely different than the previous one, because in the previous run in 2021, it was overheated, accelerated quite fast. In this case, we don't see massive selling pressure taking place. We don't see overheated indicators. We're just in the middle of that actual bull cycle that is more gradual, more organic, given the fact that we have the ETF and the inflow from the institutions, which is therefore taking a little bit more time to build up that momentum. As we can see that in basically 2024, we consolidated all the way around 70k for 9 months, and then we went vertical. And since November of 2024 until now, which is also 8 months, Bitcoin has been swimming around that 100K barrier. So it just simply takes more time before we can start having the actual continuation of the run. And then I think it's more valuable to be looking at the total market cap of crypto, which has provided a new all-time high, but just barely. And if you want to get into a peak, you want to see overheated indicators, you want to see a vertical price action. But as we can see, the trend is just upwards. We retested it and we are now consolidating before we're going to break upwards again. So that's a good sign. And then if we look at the Bitcoin dominance, strong bull market here for the Bitcoin dominance, which is about to reverse because gold is about to reverse as well. And those are peaking. The uncertainty in the macroeconomic climates are peaking at this point. The Bitcoin dominance bearish divergence is also applicable, yet we do have the case of an upwards trending market here for the dominance. So there's not really a TA to be done. But we do know that after such a long period of upwards trend, that the case or the reversal are about to come because the Chinese currency renminbi is reversing against the dollar. The dollar is becoming weaker, and as a reversal for Ether versus Bitcoin is also taking place, 1-to-1 correlation with this one. So as long as that happens, it's very likely that we're not at the end of the bull market and at the start of a bear market, but we are actually at the start of the altcoin bull market as the altcoins are reversing and Ether is starting to show strength, as we can see in this chart. During these markets, I'm always looking for opportunities to build my portfolio, and OKX is bringing you an opportunity. They are the first fully licensed exchange in Europe with the lowest fees. And to help you a little bit with your portfolio and to celebrate this milestone, they are giving away up to 50 euros in Bitcoin if you sign up today on the exchange. Signing up can be done within 5 minutes, and if you deposit 100 euros worth of crypto, you'll receive the first 20 euros in Bitcoin. Start rebuilding your portfolio today. Go to the link in the description or scan the QR code and enjoy up to 50 euro in Bitcoin. People will always keep comparing cycles with each other, which is normal, is standard. People try to find arguments for a certain thesis. However, that's the inverse of what you should be doing. Instead of having a thesis and finding arguments within the markets to validate that thesis, try to analyze the markets and create a thesis based on what the markets are telling you and based on the data that you're seeing. So that's where I think most people will go wrong in their strategy. That's also where I went wrong initially with my altcoin portfolio, which means that I'm now stuck with it and I need to do it with the data that I have and the portfolio that I have. That's why it's showing you why it's not as easy as everybody says to be a trader in the altcoin market. So if you have a thesis in the case of the 4-year cycle and think that the 4-year cycle is going to happen again, I think a lot of people will be losing a lot of value in their portfolio by just thinking that the 4-year cycle is going to happen again, as they will be left behind. And I think it's a complex market. And as we all know, the markets can humble you down. Hence why you need to remain flexible and open to any other thesis that is out there. In that case, I don't think that we are at the start of a bear market for altcoins and Bitcoin. I do believe that we are in a way longer cycle. And I do believe that the bull cycle for altcoins is yet to start. This still can have a period of 3 to 6 months of corrections or consolidations taking place. But ultimately, the trend is already upwards as Ether is outperforming Bitcoin. And it's just a matter of time before the macroeconomics and the business cycle will change and your altcoins will follow through. I'll see you again on a new update on Sunday. Ciao. Everybody thinks that the altcoin and Bitcoin market...